Hey, what's up? Welcome to the JJ Redick podcast. I have a great show for you today. I'm really excited to have on one of my favorite guys, Seth Meyers from The Late Show with Seth Meyers.
I can rewatch my writing, and I can rewatch things I did on Update with other people. For example, I can watch something that Amy and I did together, or I can watch Bill Hader, Stefan, and I together. But I don't like watching just myself. I feel like I'll only see things I wish I did differently, and that will take away my appreciation for how it went.
We talk about giving birth in an apartment building lobby, doing late night television in the age of Trump, and which of his rivals in late night television he pays attention to. We hope you enjoy. Hey, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I have a really great conversation with Seth Meyers coming up. Before I get to Seth, first of all, I just wanted to thank Brian Colangelo, thank BC for bringing me aboard last summer. It's really unfortunate how everything turned out in Philadelphia, but I'm grateful to him and sad to see that his time in Philly ended the way it did. This is a really weird sort of period of time from the time the season ends until July 1st. Really you're trying to do as much as you can to actually take your mind off basketball. But before you can do that, you've got to watch 2 more rounds of playoffs. And that can be incredibly frustrating at times because you want to still be playing. And then on non-game days, when you don't have to watch, you're trying to do everything you can to not think about basketball, and it just keeps popping back into your head. I'm not going to lie, watching the Warriors celebrate after Game 4, I had a lot of mixed emotions, a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of anger, some regret. But overall, I just, again, I keep coming back to wanting to experience that feeling that they had. It's unbridled joy, and I want to know what that's like. In the meantime, I've got to wait a few more weeks until free agency starts on July 1st. I'm going to take a little vacation in about 9 days to Italy, and then come back and figure out where I'm playing basketball next year. All right, without further ado, here's my conversation with Seth Meyers. I noticed the Pittsburgh mug, so I'm really confused about this.
Yeah.
So you're a Red Sox fan?
I am.
And you're also a Steelers fan?
I am.
And kind of a Celtics fan? And
I'm a
kind
Celtics fan,
You
yeah.
are a Celtics fan?
Yeah.
And then a kind of a Penguins fan?
Not really. I'm not really a hockey fan. My dad's from Pittsburgh, and so always a Steeler fan. Never dabbled with the Patriots at all. But then a few years ago, the Pirates started actually being a decent team, and so
you hopped on the bandwagon?
I hopped on the bandwagon as quickly as I could.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Fully admitting to it.
By the way, this is totally an aside, but this was probably 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I used to post all these videos of my son on Instagram, and my sister-in-law is a publicist. All right, and so she said to me, "Yeah, Seth Meyers, he saw somebody from his team saw these videos, and they think they're funny. They want to have you on the show. Is this true or not?"
There's no ring of truth to it.
I thought so.
Yeah, I apologize, and I'm sure they were funny and charming. And I also want to say that, you'd be welcome to come on this show, but it won't be because your son is doing funny things. We want to have you on for you, man. JJ.
I need something to promote.
Yeah.
I need a book, show.
I think we live in an era where having a podcast is enough to go into a talk show.
Okay.
We've had guests on our show that only have podcasts.
Really?
Yeah.
Give me an example.
Pod Save America guys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Those
Sorry,
guys,
I
those
got
guys
to
are
open.
awesome.
I know I'm opening with the big one.
Yeah. So the best podcast there is.
Yeah, the biggest podcast. So if you go to the podcast list, if number one, those guys.
Yeah. To see myself on the charts, I have to go to the specific category.
Oh, you have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Like sports and recreation. I don't get the.
How are you are you doing well in the sports and recreation category?
Depending on the guest.
Okay, interesting. Oh, you're guest dependent.
Yeah. So like, if I have someone that maybe some people haven't heard of, like, I'll be like 38,
Interesting.
But then if I have like, I had Kyrie Irving on.
Yeah, I listened to that one.
We talked about the flat earth theory
yes.
and dinosaurs, and that was number one.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. That was really good.
Yeah.
I also was really, you guys had a very interesting history. I didn't realize that you obviously you had experience, you went through similar experiences, which I found very interesting as well.
Yeah. We were part of a secret society.
Yeah.
At Duke.
The flat
That's all I can say. That's all I can say. I gotta open with the birthing story because congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, congratulations. I feel like a lot of people have heard this story, but it's just too fantastic.
It's really
not
good
to share if you're okay with it.
I'm happy to share it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the long and the short of it is that my wife delivered our second son in the lobby of our building. Our first son came really quickly. And so quickly that we thought he was going to be delivered in the Uber on the way to the airport, the hospital. So we were really, I only say that because we were dialed in. We didn't want the same thing to happen again. We wanted to get there with plenty of time. Yeah. But there really just wasn't any warning that he was coming until he was coming. My wife still claims she just had one long contraction. And once it started, we got in the elevator and I dialed up an Uber and we got downstairs and she just said that and obviously she knows her body better than anyone. She said, no, it's here. The baby is here right now. And I looked down and it did look, she was wearing sweatpants and it definitely looked, there was a second person in her sweatpants. And mercifully it just happened really quickly and mercifully it was our second because the first one, you just, no matter what the location is, it's so mind-blowing. And so at least I knew it was supposed to look like that. The baby was supposed to look that weird, lobby or anywhere else. But it was nuts. It's, because the thing about lobbies is they're common areas. They're not, it's not like.
No, I live in a building. I know.
Exactly. Because, it's like, in the hospital, when you get there, they put you in a room. They don't just have you in the lobby. So, and God bless, we had, these two doormen that did an incredible job of sort of ushering people. Or at least not even ushering. There was really nowhere for people to go except to wait for the whole thing to finish. Because it's a very small lobby. I think people are picturing a bigger lobby than it is. And again, you don't really think, when you're my wife, I don't think you think of like which way to aim your legs. But she was definitely pointing them towards the elevators. So had somebody come out, it would have been a moment to remember. Yeah.
I feel like you can either downplay this sort of thing, and sort of after the fact say how calm and how collected you were.
Yeah.
Like what was sort of the emotional range that you were going through and your wife too? Like looking back now.
Looking back, I think my wife, and she would say this, was so relieved she wasn't, because again, if she got in the Uber, it would have been so much worse than where she was. Because obviously the reality was, when we got in an ambulance an hour later.
At least you knew the doorman.
We knew the doorman.
The Uber driver.
Right, yeah. And then there's no way. You have a baby in an Uber, that's a 1-star ride. That brings down your average, and then it's hard not to blame the kid for the rest of his life. Yeah. But, so she, I think, was just relieved to be in a situation where she wasn't like in a bumpy car. And my wife was incredibly calm, and once she had him, I think just her motherly instincts kicked in, and she picked him up and put him on his chest, and he was crying and doing all the things that a baby's supposed to do if he's okay. I think I was all right. I don't think I was the Iceman. My mother-in-law went down and tried to pull security cam footage because she thought, oh my God, they would have security cam. And in my head, I knew that the security cam footage wouldn't match up with how cool and collected I thought I was. So I was really relieved to find out that they didn't exist because I did. I called 911, which I felt like that was, looking back, I think that was the right call. But the baby came so quickly that it really was, by the end of the call, it was he was delivered. The other problem was the amount of just like real masculinity that my son saw as quickly as he was born that was not me, but rather like firemen and police officers, because when you call 911, those are the people who show up. So, I think I was like the 9th most impressive man my son met on his first day.
He's 2 months old now, right?
Yeah. Me out.
So, we have 2 boys. As well.
Great.
Yeah.
What's your age gap between them?
Exactly 2 years.
Okay, great.
They're
That's exactly what we are.
We don't have like a birthing story. It's crazy because my first son was transverse breached.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
not exactly sure what that means, but he couldn't be birthed through the
Yeah.
So we scheduled a C-section, and then my second son had the exact same due date as my first son. So we didn't want them to have the same birthday. So we just scheduled a C-section again 2 days prior. So they're like, August 26th, August 24th.
Wow.
And saints like apart. Together, they're little devils.
Interesting.
How is 2 for you?
Two's great. I mean, I came from 2. My brother and I. So my parents figured this out because I did not make the connection. My parents figured out that my sons and my brother and I are exactly 2 years and 11 days apart, which is crazy.
That's nice.
We are best friends, my brother and I. So I'm hopeful. And I didn't care what the first one was, but I did selfishly want my oldest to have a younger brother just like I did. But yeah, so far 2's great. The second one doesn't make it as exponentially harder as I've been told that it did. Now, with that said, he's not moving around much yet. I feel like that's where I think the level of difficulty. Once they can go in different directions, that's problematic. How old are yours?
4 and 2.
Okay, gotcha. So you're there now.
Yeah.
They can scatter.
They do scatter, although it's like it's so weird, man. It's like we have a lot of stuff. Not a lot of stuff. We have stuff in our house. They have their own toys. One of them the 4-year-old has a lot more toys. We have like the same amount of utensils. Like we have multiple spoons, multiple cereal bowls. Like we have all the things they could ever need, and they only want to fight over one specific item all the time. It's all day long. And this started happening like 3 months ago, and it's like we're at the sort of the peak infighting right now.
Yeah,
it's frustrating.
It's frustrating. I can see how that's not something to look forward to. Is them actually arguing with one another? It's fine. Can I ask? Was the older one excited about the younger one from the beginning?
He was. We have this great photo. Though when my wife was pregnant, she did like her pregnancy photos, and Knox, my oldest, was in a couple of them. And so there's this picture of her belly and him standing next to it. And he's just got this like quizzical, like, what the fuck is about to happen look on his face. We waited a few days to bring him to the hospital, and
Gotcha.
So we call my youngest Squishy. And so the 4-year-old is just like, oh, Squishy, stop it. It's just like all day long. It's all we hear all day long.
Do they share a bedroom?
No, they don't. We're in a rental right now. We're renovating our apartment. In the renovated apartment, we're building them bunk beds. And they're going to share. And I think that's healthy. In New York City especially, it's healthy.
Yes.
It's healthy.
Yeah, that's it's healthy and essential.
Yeah. We actually have an extra bedroom, but now we're like, they've got to gut it out. They've got to get it out.
All right, good.
I'm always interested in sort of the quirks of people. And you're like the only late night host that doesn't deliver his opening monologue standing up.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that.
Well, it's not that complicated in that I came from a desk job at SNL. And then when I started this one, I felt it was really important to show everybody that I wasn't just going to be doing the same thing. And so I spent 18 months trying to do a thing that I wasn't as good at as the other thing I did. And then I just had this realization of, why am I trying to... It's that interesting, as you get older, it's okay to only be good at the things you're good at. Like there comes an age where you're not expected, or you shouldn't expect yourself to be able to develop another skill.
Right.
And I don't think I was terrible at doing a standing monologue, but I felt so much more comfortable when I would sit down behind the desk. I used to feel like my own warm-up comedian, if that makes sense, and that I was loosening up the crowd doing a monologue. And then when I sat down, it felt like the show started. Now it feels like the show starts right away, which is a lot nicer for me because obviously you only have a limited amount of time, and now I don't feel like I'm wasting any of it.
I can relate to this actually.
What is the parallel for you?
There is a parallel. I was thinking about this as you said this because I remember like when I was, 2-3 years in the league, like I would work on these parts of my game that they were never going to be my strengths.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to be a post ISO player. Mm-hmm. That's not who I am. I'm comfortable coming off dribble handoffs and screens. That's who I am. And you get older and you accept that. And I don't spend a single minute during the summer when I work on my game on post ISOs.
But it's important to know that you're also you're then using that time that you would have used on post ISOs to refine the skills that you're good at, because you obviously have to keep doing that. And so it wasn't, I think that was the thing. I realized that I wasn't being lazy, not trying to do another thing.
Yeah.
I was just being smarter to spend the exact same amount of time to get better at the things I'm good at.
Was there any pushback on that?
None. And I will admit that if there was any pushback, it was everybody came up to this conclusion before I did. Yeah. There were other people who said, hey, you should start at the desk. And I took offense to that and was stubborn. And it took me a while. I think it was healthier that in the end I came to the decision on my own, and then people were polite and said, oh, that's a great idea, even though they told me 6 months ago. But I was sort of the last to know.
I feel like if I switched teams and then like 3 months in, they were like, yeah, we're going to stop running that play for him. You know what I mean? It's like, exactly. Yeah, we're just going to go pin down. We're going to go pin down.
Yeah.
Are you at this point in your illustrious career, do you have nerves before a show?
I don't
because you talked about a comfort level.
Yeah.
Is it
I don't have nerves before this show because it's so you get to do it so often that you get a level of control that I haven't had at any other jobs.
Yeah.
And, unlike SNL where the host every week changes the DNA of what the show is and what the challenges are.
Yeah.
And sometimes a host comes in and there's nothing you've ever done before that prepares you for them. Here, I get to be the host every night. So the guests obviously change the show a little bit, but it all kind of runs through me. And so it's hard for it to get out of hand. So my level of nerves is not very high. I will say when I do something like host the Golden Globes, that is full butterflies. Yeah. Even though I've hosted other things, that was a night. And by the way, and one of the reasons I do things like that is I like feeling nervous in the way that you feel when you first started doing this for a living.
Yeah. You get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. I feel like
and that's sort of the juice that we're all sort of after, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's weird because, and I think there's a different juice that comes from consistency, but there is, I feel as though being at SNL was that was a junkie's high, whereas this is like just being, like drinking good wine every night and getting a little buzzed. Like it was street drugs. SNL was a street drugs high, and this is
because you didn't know what sort of the reaction, the outcome. And it's organic. The improv.
It wasn't. There's not like that again. That's a whole different thing. When the beginning of my career before I was on television, improvising that had a real thrill to it because there was no, the difference with improv is there was no preparation, so the stakes were a little bit lower in that you didn't work on something that somebody could then tear apart. Whereas at SNL, the biggest difference with SNL is you do one show a week, and then you and all your friends go to a party till 6 a.m, and you lose your Sunday. But because there's this giant party at the end of the week, in your head, it's hard not to think it wasn't a big deal. Because there was a huge party. We don't have party. Once you have a late night talk show, there's almost no parties. Like you have to do something like the Golden Globes to have a party.
You started at SNL as a writer, right?
I actually was a cast member who then did so much writing they made me a writer. If that makes sense. Yeah, I got hired as a cast member.
Okay, so you got hired as a cast member. This was 2001?
Yes.
Okay. And you did that before as a writer for how long?
So I was, I think 5 years as just a cast member, but not a good cast member. I think that if they looked back, they would have said, oh, we should have hired him as a writer. But we'd hired him as a cast member. I was a good enough writer that I think that's what kept me employed there. And then I was lucky enough, I think we all need those breaks of an opening happening that you were suited for. But when Tina Fey left to go do 30 Rock, they needed a head writer. And so that's when I officially joined the writing staff.
The life of a writer.
Yeah.
It's a grind?
It's a grind.
Do you have empathy for writers? Do you have empathy for people on your staff?
I have less empathy for them. I just think I'm great to work for. No, I do have empathy for writers. I have empathy for, particularly our monologue writers who generate so much material.
Yeah.
And so little of it gets used. there's such a low yield of what monologue jokes that are written to monologue jokes that are used. I have empathy for, Sal Gentile, who writes A Closer Look 3 times a week. Like that, I have empathy for how much cable news he has to watch to piece that together. And then, I have empathy for anyone who is working at a late night talk show, the people who write the sketches for this show. There's so many shows now, and there's also been so many shows over the last 50 years, and trying to come up with things that are new and feel fresh, I think, is a really hard job. And, I just by nature write less now at this job than I did at SNL, where I was head writer. And in general, am a happier, healthier person because I don't have to go through that writing grind.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Because there's an inherent pressure as a writer, especially if there's other writers on the show.
Yeah.
To get your jokes on the show.
Yes, there's a finite amount of space.
Yeah.
And also, it's you don't write it and turn it into someone who then goes behind a closed door and makes a decision and comes out and tells you what happened. At SNL, you have this table read. And so not only are you desperate to succeed rather than fail, it's very public amongst your peers how it goes. And it's obvious how it's going. That's the problem with writing comedy versus writing drama.
Yeah.
Good drama, the audience makes the same noises that they do during bad drama. But with comedy, his silence is a very, troubling and obvious thing to hear.
So, what is then the key to delivering a joke, to taking it from the writing room? I'm a huge fan of yours.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
I love your delivery. I mean, there's just something about it that is just awesome to me. And so, what is the key to taking sort of a joke that 14, 15 people can laugh at, and then delivering that on camera where it resonates with a wider audience?
Well, I'm loath to parallel what you and I do because I think what you do has a much higher level of difficulty. But I will say, I think the one thing that would be in common is when I'm doing it, I'm not thinking about it at all, if that makes sense. That I feel there's some muscle memory is a weird way to put it because the muscles are very limited to my head and my face. But I think that I've told enough jokes over my career and developed a delivery that the nice thing about it is how little I have to think about it. And when I first started doing SNL, when I first started doing Weekend Update, I was very aware of how much I was thinking about how to say a joke. And then also assessing how I thought it went after I told it. And I remember Lauren Michaels used to always point out, you have to, when Saturday comes around, you have to stop being a writer and stop assessing how it's going and just live in the moment of telling the jokes and not caring how they go. Because the audience is aware. If you feel like a joke bombed and you take it personally, they can read it on your face and now they're thinking about that on your next joke. So you kind of just have to have a short memory and just move on.
Because whether it's a monologue or Weekend Update, it's sequential. You're delivering one joke after another. It's like a game.
Yeah.
You're shooting a shot, coming down the court, shooting again. And so you have to have sort of a short memory to just move on to the next shot.
Absolutely. And you have to not completely change if the one doesn't work, you can't change your delivery and try to be a different kind of comedian for the next joke. You can't sort of cycle through different personas. You have to I'm trying so hard not to say trust the process right now, but that really is the perfect explanation for what I'm saying. But I came to it honestly, you guys. I don't think anyone listening would say that I forced that in here. But yeah, so I will say this. When I go out and do stand-up, which is a little different because that's a case where you have an hour that you've prepared and you've done in front of different people, there are nights where you can start a stand-up show and realize, unlike this, where you're both performing for the people in the house and the people at home, and the people at home is a much larger audience than the people in the house. When you do stand-up, it's really just about those people in that theater. And some nights you realize, oh, they're this kind of audience. And so I can make a subtle adjustment to them that will make this more enjoyable for this particular performance of these jokes that if they were a different kind of audience, I would maybe do differently. So that's the only way I feel like to adjust on the fly. With something like the Golden Globes, I was very curious to see how they would react to jokes because it was sort of I think it was the first award show after the Me Too movement happened. And so there was, sort of dangerous territory, maybe not dangerous, but I was curious to see how they'd respond. Now, I should say, if they'd responded badly, it wasn't like I had a plan B. Right. You write the jokes and it's too late. They're on the teleprompter. But
so what were you more nervous for? The Golden Globes, or I know you've done a couple of these now, or the White House Correspondents' Dinner? Because you did that once?
Once, yeah. 2011. I think probably that just because 2011 was like 7 years younger and a little bit greener. Yeah. And Obama also got to tell jokes, and he was really good at them. Yeah. Like that was the part that was, I think, the most nerve-wracking about that.
Yeah. That's interesting. You mentioned the Me Too movement, so you're cognizant of the fact as you're getting ready to host the Globes that people are a little on edge.
Sure.
Are people getting too offended now? Like, what is the line that you have to walk on a nightly basis telling a joke?
Well, we talk about our own personal taste here all the time.
Yeah.
And we have a nice, diverse writing staff where people have the freedom to speak up and say, I'm afraid this is going to be taken this way when you mean it to be taken the other. And so ultimately, I'm not, I think I think both sides of the political spectrum have people who are going to take offense for the joy of being offended. I think that there is something is released, an endorphin is released for certain people to be offended and to be outraged. And sometimes I think offense is done in good faith. Yeah. And other times I think people say they're offended in bad faith. Ultimately, I think if you approach it with, I think a lot of people who don't agree with me on issues will think this is nonsense, but we do try very hard to be decent on this show. There are some people, obviously, we think deserve less decency than others, but we feel like we have the receipts to show.
We'll get to Trump.
Well, not just him. But yeah, so that, but ultimately, I feel like if you do the work in a way that you feel has integrity, you can ultimately weather people saying they're offended by it.
How much do you hang out on Twitter?
Enough. I would like to hang out less. I took it off my phone this summer, but then when I'm sitting at my computer, which is most of my day, it's hard not to go there.
Yeah.
But I don't look at replies that much. I don't.
No.
So I'm not I'm not engaging with what people are saying to me as much as I'm using it as a news feed.
Yeah. Similar, but it's inevitable that you just come across sort of those, things live on Twitter for 24 hours or sometimes a month, but they live on Twitter, and people, I think, tend to overreact to things.
Well, I think there's a lot of the world that's not on Twitter or engaging. Yeah,
it's an insular world. I totally.
And we're also building our own insular worlds based on our tastes. Mm-hmm. So, based on, if you get on Twitter and for someone like me, I started following, sports writers I liked and political writers I liked and people who wrote about comic books I liked, and then they liked other people. And so then I followed that out. And now there are things that are happening on Twitter that I think everybody's talking about. And the reality is none of it's turning up on other people's Twitter feeds. But I just realized, I don't want to throw Twitter under the bus because I ultimately think humanity has been the problem behind it. But more often than not,
Wait, what?
Well, I mean, like Twitter, I feel like,
humanity's the problem.
Twitter's the worst. People are like, Twitter's the worst, but like humans is what made it the worst. Like if we were a different species, Twitter would be fine. It's just that we took it and made it this awful place. I mean, it's a human choice to say something awful on Twitter. Like Twitter just said like, we just wanted to give you guys a platform to talk to each other. But I just realized 90% of the time the things I read on Twitter are not making me happier.
Right.
So, and it's people, and again, we live in an era where obviously a lot of the people I follow who write about the news, even reporters who aren't opinion writers, they're just people who tell you like this happened today. More often than not, what happened today does not put me in a better mood. So that's what I'm trying to at least live. We just had 2 weeks off. I took it off my phone. I spent time with my kids and I was a lot happier.
I don't have the app on my phone, but I inevitably go to twitter.com in my Safari browser. But for a lot of people, like with social media, there's research on this. I'm not just making this up, but as you sort of post something and you get your likes and replies, same thing with Instagram, there's like dopamine hits to the brain, and that's for a lot of people why they can't put social media down.
Yeah.
I don't hardly ever post anything, and I don't really read replies when I do. So I'm like trying to figure out why it's so addicting.
Yeah.
And I think it may be a little bit FOMO, because I think it is the quickest way to sort of aggregate news.
Yes.
And there's no other reason really why I'm on there at this point.
Right. And the thing
other than getting mad.
Yeah.
Like if I want to get angry, if I want to get, just go on Twitter.
I'm starting to try, just as an experiment, what it's like to miss some news and see how that feels.
Yeah.
Because we just had 2 weeks off. I could have just not, like, if I had managed to actually put my phone down, I could have avoided the whole Eagles White House thing, and I don't think I would have cost me anything. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, I think it's an important story, and I think what happened there brings a lot of issues to the fore, but I would have been fine. I could have gone to dinner parties. I could have managed to be a human being without actually knowing that happened, and I just would have been happier if I didn't know that happened. But don't you feel like there's that? I mean, I feel like it makes sense that it would be curious to you, because obviously you have a dopamine releasing profession.
Sure.
I think I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
When you elicit a laugh.
Yeah.
100%. I've said this before on my podcast, and I apologize for being crass, but like when the ball goes through the basket.
Yeah.
I have like a little mini orgasm.
Sure.
It's like that's my dopamine hit every time I see the ball go through the basket.
And I feel the same way about, not every laugh, but there are some days where like something happens and you really feel like, oh, that's all right. So look, I feel like everybody should be allowed to have that feeling. I think we're really lucky, I guess is what I'm saying. And so I don't want to say to people, again, I think that there are people who use social media for ill. But I also get that there are people who, without it, had a lot of less interactions with people. And I guess I'm still hopeful that there is a social media that exists in our future that is what we had thought it would be, which was this way to connect people and give them communities and bring them happiness.
Yeah, so one of the things, I'm going to change topics in a second, but I guess one of the things that I'm curious about is the sort of blurring of lines now. Mm-hmm. You brought up the anthem debate about the Eagles not coming to the White House, and the NFL owners coming up with this anthem rule. In politics and entertainment and sports, it just seems like there's a crossover into everything now. Yeah, like it's very hard. I'm curious. Not that you're a political show, but when you started the show, and then in 2014, and then Trump gets elected in 2016, was there like, okay, now we're going to move in that direction more?
It happened pretty organically. At first, there was just the arrival of Trump into the election. Yeah. Which we thought was going to be a month. We'd been through before, back at SNL. It didn't seem real. But because of that, all of a sudden, it just seemed more interesting. And to be honest, certainly in the early days, funnier than the other things that were happening in the world. But we definitely shifted into, and it happened around the same time. A lot of things happened at once. We sat down behind the desk, which let us do jokes that had graphics, let us use video more. And then Donald Trump entered the race. And so there was sort of this confluence of things that made it made sense to start being more political as a show. And we just continued to embrace it. We thought it was going to end as well. I can't stress how wrong I have been about all the outcomes that have happened. But we were looking forward to being slightly less political when the election was over, just because no matter who, no matter what you think about Hillary, it was just going to be conventional compared to what had been unconventional at that point. But now it continues to be unconventional in a way that it seems like oversight, not to mention what's happening every day.
How do you untangle the web, though? Because in a given day, there's like 5 things that maybe come out. And I read an article about sort of like sitcom characters, like his
Oh, yeah.
cast of,
No, exactly. Every time one of them
comrades.
gets boring, he just
Yeah.
brings in a new.
And so, like, how do you untangle the web and say, like, all right, this is what's going to be on the show tonight? I mean, it just seems like there's almost too much material with him.
There is, there's a lot of, oh, hey, did you see this thing he said? And sometimes you'll say it to the writer of the piece, and they'll just look at you with the ashen, and because it's 3 PM and they just want him to stop saying things. They're just, can you just give us this grace period to get this on TV, and then just start again tomorrow? You just try to. It's like triage at a ER. Who's bleeding out the fastest, and trying to order the gurneys in a way that you can treat, all the bleeders. But yeah, you just make choices. And I will say, one of the frustrating things has been, and I think this is, well, by the way, I should say this is probably tenfold frustrating for actual reporters who probably want to talk about other things, but I feel a responsibility to report on the things he's saying. And I do sometimes feel, the press makes mistakes, don't get me wrong, but they take a lot of heat for giving him too much oxygen. But, he's the president of the United States, and everything he says, has a ripple effect. So you do have to, I feel like you can't do him the courtesy of not reporting everything he says.
Are you frustrated at times, though, I'm saying as the sort of the guy on the show that you said earlier, you have control. So are you frustrated on a daily basis by sort of having to flip the script last minute as things pop up?
No, that part is still exciting. I mean, these shows, again, the fear would be when they get boring and you don't have that thrill of, oh, something happened, let's figure it out. So that's not frustrating. And I should say that the news is more frustrating to me on nights we don't have a show. It's very cathartic to get to work this out in front of an audience with jokes and feel as though, and don't get me wrong, I think this is a false feeling, but to some degree you feel like you're taking the power back with jokes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a helpful thing at a time where a lot of people feel a little helpless.
Hold that thought, Seth. We're going to take a quick break. Produced in one of the world's longest-running distilleries, Belvedere Vodka is the world's finest all-natural vodka. Crafted by a collective of master distillers, Belvedere is made with non-GMO Polish rye, pure water, and no additives. Recognized for quality, Belvedere was named the ISC World Vodka Producer of the Year in 2015, 2016, and 2017. Hopefully they'll win in 18. Belvedere's unmatched quality reminds me of one of the greatest teams in the history of the NBA. The 1982-1983 Philadelphia 76ers, featuring legends of the game like Dr. J, Moses Malone, and Maurice Cheeks, just to name a few. The 76ers won the championship that year in absolutely dominating fashion, eviscerating their opponents in each of the 3 rounds, only losing one game and coming dangerously close to making the great Moses Malone famous faux prediction come true. Over the course of their storied history, the 76ers have always played a brand of basketball of unparalleled quality, just like Belvedere Vodka. Enjoy a delicious cocktail with Belvedere Vodka today. Remember to always drink responsibly and trust the process. Are you hiring? Posting your position to job sites and waiting for the right people to see it? ZipRecruiter knew there was a smarter way, so they built a platform that finds the right job candidates for you. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and invites them to apply to your job. These invitations have revolutionized how you find your next hire. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. And ZipRecruiter doesn't stop there. They even spotlight the strongest applications you receive, so you never miss a great match. The right candidates are out there. ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Businesses of all sizes trust ZipRecruiter for their hiring needs. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Redick. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Redick, R-E-D-I-C-K. ZipRecruiter.com/Redick. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, we're back with Seth Meyers.
Even though you're telling jokes, I think there's an element of like darkness. Like, is late night television dark right now? Not just the Trump thing. I mean, I think about mass shooting, school shooting.
Yeah.
And those things have to sort of be talked about. I assume every time there's one, you probably open with that.
Yeah, that is those are the worst days for a lot of reasons, and ours is far down the list. But I will say those are the days where, at least with Trump, you feel like there's always some version of a joke, and there's always some, for those that don't like Trump, there's this, at least there's the way democracy works is this is not an all-time, he doesn't have it forever. He's not, right.
Maybe.
I've come to the conclusion he probably has no idea about term limits and is going to be so upset.
He's already joked about it a few times.
Yeah.
That maybe he should just be president like the Chinese president.
Yeah, and he floats it. I think he joke floats everything to sort of see how it goes.
Yeah.
But those days, and it's really hard, obviously, because that's the thing I feel the least equipped for, based on everything I've done up to my life to this point, is finding words to talk about things like that in a way that doesn't seem, cliche or empty. At the same time, though, what words aren't cliche or empty at this point? I don't, I certainly, and a better host than me maybe can one day come up with those answers, but it's really hard.
How long have we been recording for?
36 minutes.
Okay, perfect. It seems like a good time to take a break. We'll change it. Actually, I just thought of this. What sports did you play or do you play growing up?
I was a bad baseball player.
Bad baseball player.
I was a mediocre track athlete. Okay. And
what events?
Everything. They just cycle me through. It was one of the sports. Track at my high school you couldn't get cut from, so they would just kind of try different things.
All right.
But sprint, but a terrible sprinter. Yeah.
Sprinter.
Yeah.
If there's one thing, as you obviously sports fan, if there's one thing in sports that you wish you could do at the highest level, what would it be?
Highest level, I think a baseball pitcher.
Okay.
Yeah. I think working one day a week or one every 5 days, but also that it's the one baseball job where you get to be in the action, and it seems very cerebral.
Yeah.
And I think I would enjoy that.
There's something very masculine about it too.
Yeah, but I think
trying to dominate another person.
Right. Although I think I kind of would want to be like a Greg Maddux, like the
painting the corners.
Yeah, like 85, 88.
Two-seam fastball with a lot of movement. For me, it's golf, man.
See, nothing. That does nothing for me.
Really?
Yeah.
I wish I could just hit the ball with a nice right to left draw.
How much time do you put into it?
I retired until I retired.
Okay.
So
gotcha. 3
years ago, I was like, I'm gonna
take a break,
cut back a little bit.
Gotcha. Was it providing you frustration?
No.
Okay.
No, I got to the point where it didn't matter what I shot or how I played. I just was happy to be outside because I'm in a gym all day. But no, it was more my back. I wanted to protect myself a little bit.
I also, I don't know. I feel that I can't even imagine with my kids at the age they are right now telling my wife that I was off to do that. I have a.
That's also the other part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the ages our kids are is not a great. I'm 44, so I had my first kid when I was 42. So all my college friends who are my closest friends, their kids are all 10 to 13, and so now they're all taking golf trips because that's the age where they can do that again.
Sure.
And I'm jealous, but at the same time, I would argue that the 10 years that I stayed single was really awesome, and I might be thinking about that on my deathbed. We don't know.
There you go. Do you have crossing over between sports and late night? No. Do you have do you have rivals? Is there? I don't want to say that you dislike a certain host or a show, but is there a host or a show where you're like, man, they did it again?
It's not rivalry, but there are people that I'm impressed with. Yeah. I'm really last week tonight, John Oliver, was just really, especially because he finds different things.
Yeah. But don't you think, I'm not hating on John Oliver because I love his show.
Yeah.
But he has a week to write everything.
Yeah. But I worked on a show that was a week, which was SNL. And it can work against you too.
Sure.
One of the nice things about a daily show, which has its own challenges, don't get me wrong, I think they're equal level of difficulties, but you kind of have to move on. Like I'll do a show today and then I'll go home and just immediately start thinking about tomorrow. And it gets to be like, emotionally you hold on to each show a little bit less, which I think is good. I also think that when you do a show once a week, whether you're, John or Sam B or anyone that does the weekly shows, you can always, it's like, oh, it's 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. We have a show on Sunday. We should go home. And it's like, or we can stay late. Because we do it every day and because we have to generate shows, you just kind of get into a habit of saying, okay, that's over. Let's move on. Let's not do any, postmortem. Let's just charge ahead.
When I get done with a game, I go home and I check the box scores.
Of your game or other games across the league?
All the other games
gotcha.
across the league. Some of it is friendly, I think. Mm-hmm. Some of it is, Kyle Korver. Let's see how he did tonight. Is Kyle playing well? Some of it is like team related, for one or two games behind somebody in the standings. I want to know how they're doing.
Yeah.
And then some of it is just like pure on, just like rage, jealousy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
There's got to be obviously you're checking the ratings.
You're
getting informed of the ratings.
We're aware of the ratings.
You're informed of what other shows are doing.
Yeah. But what I realized is they don't, and I think I certainly paid more attention when we started, and then the longer you do them, you realize, there aren't giant swings in these things. They're pretty, they move a little here or there, but not enough to check it like a box score, I think. But don't get me wrong, like I absolutely have seen.
Check it like a box score. Yeah. That's true.
And by the way, I say this as someone who wishes there. I wish there were. Yeah. I love statistics so much.
Okay.
Nothing would make me happier is if there was a printout in the morning of how many jokes we all told, but no editorializing, just numbers. Yeah. Like last night in his monologue, Seth went 7 for 10. That would make me so happy if there was a main sort of Elias Sports Bureau that was just doing statistical breakdown. Because I feel like we would have really good numbers.
I guarantee in the age of statistics, there are people that do this. There's got to be. Maybe not officially.
Right.
Not officially.
Well, that's the thing.
But there's somebody DVRing all the shows and making a ledger for this.
When we first started doing the show, there was a guy who was doing it, and I really enjoyed looking at it. And then I think he just realized, I can't watch 11 shows a day.
Do you watch your own show?
No, I don't.
Why?
I don't. Ultimately, I just see.
I should actually. Let me ask you: have you ever done that? At any point in time, when you're on SNL, did you rewatch the show?
I can rewatch sketches I wrote that I'm not in. I can rewatch my writing.
Yeah.
And I can rewatch things I did on Update with other people. For example, I can watch something that Amy and I did together, or I can watch Bill Hader, Stefan, and I together. But I don't like watching just myself. I feel like I'll only see things I wish I did differently.
Yeah.
And that will take away my appreciation for how it went. Mostly, and with this show now, on any given night, we don't have disasters.
Sure.
If we had a disaster, I'd say let's roll back the tape and look. But I don't want to get caught up in that world of nitpicking, because there's always things you do wrong. But I think one of the important things about hosting a late night show is they're a little bumpy, and because ultimately people are watching it because they like you. They want to spend time with you at 12:30 at night,
sure.
And so
I want to spend time with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm like, ultimately, I think I would just find things I don't like about me as a person, as opposed to the show itself.
There's this phenomenon where people don't like listening to their own voice.
Yeah,
is that the case? Because I can't. I try to listen to my podcast.
Oh, so you can't even listen? Well,
yeah. I mean, I get through most episodes.
Yeah,
but it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I don't love the sound of my own voice. And I remember realizing
I like it, Seth.
Thanks. Yours is great. How do you feel when people say, has anybody ever said to you, I don't think I've done this, but I have done this to other podcasts. Would you be offended if somebody said they listened to your podcast at 1.5 speed? This is a serious question.
No,
Okay,
not
great.
at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I agree with you. I don't think you should take offense. There are a lot of podcasts out there.
There's so many good podcasts.
And
the
so-
fact that you even like subscribe to it, you don't
Yeah.
have to listen to it. Just subscribe to it.
Right.
Like I love that.
Yeah.
I love
I've
that.
said, I made the mistake of saying it in front of someone and their sound engineer was in the room. And you realize,
Yeah.
oh, these are people that put a lot of time into the sonal bed.
Adam.
You're okay with this, Adam? Do you, well, no, you be honest.
So for me, it depends on the podcast.
Okay.
Like if it's conversational, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But if there's like highly edited stuff, that's when I'm like, we
You,
put so much time into
I
it.
see.
At
Okay,
yeah.
pace.
Yeah.
all right, that's very fair.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes I forget now that I'm listening to a podcast at 1.5, and then the podcast will like say, "Oh, here's a clip from a concert," and it'll be a song I know, and it's so
Yeah.
jarring, and you realize, "Oh, this whole time because I listen to books on tape, and I can get it up to 2 times. I can do times 2, and the way I got up to times 2 was I listened to 2.5 until I went crazy, and then went down to 2, and was like, "This is the dream."
This is the dream.
But that's just I just don't have enough time in my
Sure.
day for. There's already 100 things I feel like I'm not doing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's what's really weird. You asked about people listening to my podcasts. I get a lot of people as I'm walking through Brooklyn, where I
Yeah.
live, and they'll be like, "JJ, love your podcast." No one ever says to me like, "You're a great player." It's very weird,
Well, do you think?
and I don't really have that many listeners, so it's like,
But do you think?
I think
All right, well,
I think
hold
they're
on.
not really listening to the podcast.
But all right, first of all, you're not.
But then they'll
You
be like,
don't-
"I listened to the obscure episode that you did on so and so," and I'm like, "Oh, you do listen to the podcast."
All right, I have a theory about this.
Okay.
This is a theory I'm making up on the fly.
Okay.
But I feel like people could watch you play basketball forever and feel like they don't know you.
Oh,
But I think they listen to their podcast and they feel like, I think if you listen to people's podcasts, the same thing with me. I think like, you know, now that when you're out and when your job is to be Seth Meyers as opposed to being an actor who plays other people, like people have every right to treat you like a friend because again, you're spending time with them every night. And so I feel like that is why they're connecting with you like that. Either that or they just don't think much of you as a player. Also, but also, don't you think if you were in like Philadelphia, it would be different?
what do you mean?
Well, you're in Brooklyn.
Oh no, this
like-
happens everywhere.
Okay, this happens
everywhere.
Okay, so this isn't about
Philly,
like,
Brooklyn.
Okay, gotcha.
Last weekend or 2 weekends ago, I did a guy's trip to Nashville. Had a lot of people that apparently had listened to the podcast.
That's great.
Which it means a lot to me.
Of course.
And I always say to them, like, the fact that you listen to the podcast, the fact that I have one listener,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. I'm
It's
thrilled.
they're very.
It's just at this point, like how I'm known for, like I'm a podcaster
Yeah.
over NBA player.
Well, it's interesting. When I was a cast member at SNL, I desperately wanted to be a writer. And Lauren used to make fun of me and say that, everyone else wants to go in the other direction.
Yeah.
And I would say that you are that like to 100th, like times 100. There's very, I would guess there's more podcasters who want to be in the NBA than NBA players who want to be podcasters.
Yes.
Yeah. Are there others? Are there any other
You
current
watch
NBA?
Arrested Development?
I do.
Yeah. So
I haven't watched this
There's
new
always
season.
money in the banana stand.
Exactly.
There's not always money in podcasts.
No, this is not.
But
Yeah.
there is money in professional sports, I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's good. And then you put some of that away. That is going to
Yeah.
be, to keep the podcast up and running once.
Yeah. Last question for you.
Okay.
Some of your predecessors in late night television, there's been a lot of turnover in the last few years, but some of your predecessors had these illustrious 30 plus year careers. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
So I was at SNL for 12 and a half years, which is a very long time
Yeah.
in SNL years, and longer than I ever thought I'd be there. So because the last job was over a decade, and because so many people do these jobs for maybe 3 decades, I kind of came into it. I was thinking about it in 10-year chunks.
Okay.
I thought maybe I'll be lucky enough to do this in a 10-year chunk, and then assess how I feel about it and how I think it's going. So I think we're at 4.5, and I still really like it, and I hope it's what I'm doing. It is one of those jobs you take, and there aren't a lot of jobs after it. Historically.
Sure.
Especially for someone with my limited skill set. I think that there are other people who host shows like this that you go, oh, they could also do this, this, and this. Whereas I think that people look at me and say, oh, you can. It's definitely this.
You were born to do this.
Either that or
You were born to read jokes from a desk.
Read jokes.
I'm just kidding.
No. I'll take it. I'm happy here than anywhere else.
All right, Seth, I appreciate the time.
Hey, I'm glad
Thank
this
you.
finally worked out.
Yeah,
thank you for staying healthy.
Oh, yeah.
enough
Actually, if we didn't get this on the air earlier, this is the third time we've scheduled a podcast.
Yeah.
The first was in December. I pulled my hamstring. The second was in January. I broke my leg. And then today, I made it here. No injuries.
It was definitely, if it had been like a setup on a date, I'd be like, he doesn't want to go. It's just like he hurt his leg again.
And I'm the one asking you.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. I was like, this sadist keeps setting it up and then hurting his leg. So I think off season was always when this was going to happen. All right, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's podcast. Thanks again to Seth Meyers, and thank you for listening. If you like the show, please remember to give us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. Next time, we are having on Donovan Mitchell, so be on the lookout for that. Until then, take care.